All right, so we all know climate change is this huge global crisis, right? We've got the international agreements, we have the scientific consensus, but there's still this massive question hanging in the air. How do we actually turn all that agreement, all that talk, into a real, concrete plan that works? Today, we're going to dig into a framework that tries to do just that.
Because that's the real sticking point, isn't it? The problem isn't so much about believing the science anymore. It's about the doing. It's about execution. How do we build that bridge from knowing we have a serious problem to actually solving it on a global scale?
Okay, so let's dive right in. First up, we need to get our heads around the sheer scale of the challenge we're actually facing here.
Now, the good news is our foundation for action is totally solid. The scientific community is on the same page. Climate change is real, it's caused by us, and its impacts are so severe that we have to act, like yesterday. This isn't just a hunch, it's our shared starting line. The science gives us the what and the why.
But that how, yeah, that's where things get really tangled. This right here perfectly captures the core tension. See, climate change demands global, coordinated solutions, but our world? It's a patchwork of local interests. We're talking different economies, different political systems, totally different social priorities. So even when we all know a green transition is the right move, all these competing interests can just stop progress dead in its tracks.
So, how in the world do we cut through all that complexity? Well, we turn to one of the most powerful tools we have in our arsenal, data. Let's see how we can use it to map out a clear, actionable path forward.
You know, from a data science point of view, our big fuzzy goal gets turned into a measurable target. Think of it this way. The one big thing we want to change, the final score we're trying to affect, is called the dependent variable. For our purposes, that's carbon emissions. Simple, clear, and something you can actually count.
And hey, if carbon emissions are the outcome, then we need to figure out which levers we can pull to change it, right? These are the things we can control, like new government policies, big investments from the private sector, and even how much the public gets involved. In data speak, these are the independent variables. This whole approach lets us see exactly what happens to our big goal when we pull each of these different levers.
And this isn't just guesswork or hoping for the best. It's a really structured three-step process. First, you gather a ton of data to understand exactly where we are right now. That's the business as usual scenario. Then you analyze all that data to see where we're headed if we just keep doing what we're doing. And finally, this is the cool part. You use that as a baseline to simulate changes. You get to virtually test drive different policies to see what works best before you roll them out in the real world.
So, let's start building our solution, piece by piece. We're going to begin with the most fundamental parts to create a simple but surprisingly powerful model.
This slide just boils the problem down to its absolute essence. On the left side, you've got the main sources of carbon emissions, power plants, industry, transportation, deforestation, and on the right, you have the tools in our toolkit to fight back, renewable energy, planting more trees, and so on. It's a direct push and pull relationship.
And that's really the power of this first step. By modeling the relationship between these two groups, we create what we can call a simple transition model. The key takeaway here is that this model helps us prioritize. It shows us which actions, like pouring money into renewables to replace old power plants, will give us the biggest bang for our buck in cutting emissions.
But look, a simple model is useful, for sure, but it's not the whole story. To make it truly effective, we have to build on it by adding two absolutely critical layers: finance and reality.
Because, let's be honest, a plan is only as good as its feasibility, right? To make our simple model something that can actually work in the real world, we need to add a couple more crucial dimensions.
The first layer we absolutely have to add is, you guessed it, finance. Any plan for a global energy transition has to answer that multi-trillion-dollar question: how do we pay for all this?
So, by plugging in funding sources like private investments and financial tools like carbon credits, which basically put a price on pollution, our simple model evolves. It becomes the climate finance model. And this is a huge leap forward because it doesn't just tell us what to do. It starts to show us how we can actually afford to do it, making the whole thing way more tangible.
And finally, we have to add the most complex variable of them all. After the science and the finance, we have to account for that messy, unpredictable, but totally essential element of human reality.
This is where it all comes together. The complex system model starts to factor in the economy, political dynamics, social factors, and all those unique local conditions.
Because a policy that looks perfect on paper can completely fall apart if it ignores economic impacts or political roadblocks. This final model tries to account for the world as it actually is, not just as we'd like it to be.
So what's the end game for all this modeling? Well, it's about creating something much bigger than just a plan. It's about creating a vision for the future.
And this, right here, is the ultimate ambition. A fully integrated model that combines the science, the money, and all the complex realities of our world. Well, that becomes a true blueprint for a sustainable future. It would be a monumental achievement, a kind of guiding star that gives purpose and direction to everything we're trying to do.
So, in the end, it really all comes down to this. Through data and smart modeling, we can move way beyond just guesswork. We can design effective, feasible plans for a more sustainable world. We literally have the tools. The only question left is whether we'll have the collective will to actually use them.